Okay, hello everyone. So today we'll look at the teachings of government human resource management that is outlined in the governing principles of ancient China, and we'll discuss a lot about the best practices and the theories behind them. Um, Now, the human resource management comes with a lot, a logical sequence, and we design. I designed the today's seminar based on this sequence from employer's perspective. Before recruiting somebody, the first thing that we do is to observe the candidate and test their abilities. This is something that I did before as well while working in the financial industry. Because sometimes you have to be the recruiter interviewing candidates and things like that. Okay, so it's actually very interesting. Um, so this is our focus today. Okay. And by the way, Tyler, am I sharing it all right? Can you see the share
Yeah,
screen? I'm just making sure
yeah,
because I don't want to be. Yeah. Okay.
it
Thank you.
looks.
I don't want to embarrass myself too much. Um, Now, before we formally begin, I think let's agree on one thing first, right? Is that the ethical standard of government officials is absolutely essential for the fate of the country. And generally speaking, the ethical standard of the government officials uh, has an impact on the way they carry out their government duties and serve the people, right? That's understandable. But knowing the importance of the officials doesn't necessarily mean that we understand them. I mean, okay, I guess some of our viewers may argue that, well, yes, we do. We understand them, right? We have access to their resume. We know the list of their achievements, and we can make a pretty good judgment on their quality. And we can access their LinkedIn page as well, and things like that. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And as you'll see in this seminar today, knowing somebody is both an art and a science, and it's very methodical and complex. Okay, but then now let's ask an even more obvious question: why do we even bother to understand them in the first place? I mean, government officials, right? Um, I guess that the answer is much deeper than the simple response, such as because they're important. A lot of people are bothered by the idea that they're misunderstood by others. Okay, for example, as a Chinese person who's been living abroad for 20 something years, I can tell you there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Chinese from certain part of the world even today, and many of our foreign friends completely changed their perception about the Chinese after visiting the country themselves. So, still, this phenomenon of misunderstanding bother, bothers a lot of people. Now, Confucius made a very interesting comment about misunderstanding. He said that he would not be afflicted when he was misunderstood, but he would be afflicted that he did not know others. Very interesting, isn't it? I think because being misunderstood is not something that we can control. And the only thing that we have to do is to wait for people to know more about you. And that takes time. But the opposite, which is misunderstanding others, can lead to a series of troubles, such as inappropriate interaction and conflicts and so on. Okay. So from the government perspective, I'm sorry, human resource perspective, the only way to utilize human resource properly or human capital properly is by getting to know them. Um, you see, if being understood by others is a passive thing, then understanding others is much more proactive, a proactive action, something that we can do, we can improve ourselves. So now the question is, how do we do that? How do we achieve a good understanding of others? Um, According to the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, okay, Lao Tzu, the precondition is to know oneself first. Okay, so before you're looking at other people, you look at yourself. You look inwards. He said, knowing others requires wisdom, but knowing oneself is enlightenment. Now, what does that mean? You see, when we are judging others, right, either an individual person or an ethnic group or an entire foreign country, we're doing so using our own knowledge and our own experience, right? In other words, we're trying to understand the features of another group of people through our own lens, like looking through a binocular. Now, the binocular is subject to certain bias, isn't it? And this bias will result in the misperception of the subject to a certain degree. So, in order to retrieve the true picture of the subject, scientists would have to understand the bias as accurate as possible and then adjust the observed picture accordingly. Okay, so this is how we know the world is not flat, right? Even though it looks really flat, doesn't it? So it's the same idea in judging people, um, only that it's more difficult. Um, Now, our observation suffers from many things because we're talking about bias, right? We have our bias as well. Our observation suffers from a lot of things, like personality, our own personality, right? Our limited experience, limited knowledge, personal habits, etc. Okay, so that's why Lao Tzu said we must achieve certain degree of self-enlightenment in order to understand our own personal traits and biases. So we have to understand ourselves, at least to some extent, so that we know that when we look at others, uh, are there any biases? Okay. After that, we can identify the true characteristics of other people more accurately. That is, I guess, both art and science. Now, when it comes to government recruitment is more crucial. Why? Because it will help the leader and the recruitment function to identify the advantages and pitfall of the candidates better, and that really is important to the country, right? That was the first reason. Now, the second reason why it's important to understand the officials, because we're looking at the governing principles of ancient China, and it's mostly about managing officials. Okay, not all of it, of course, but a big part of it. The second reason why this is important is that it will help the observer to self-cultivate. The the observer can be either a leader or just a colleague, right? Understanding others is not for the purpose of calculating plots against others or setting someone up. It is for the purpose of offering appropriate assistance. But to do that, one must first cultivate oneself. That's the essence of ancient Chinese knowledge, ancient Chinese culture, if you like. Okay, is to start from the self. Now, when we observe others and find the pros and cons, we think about whether or not we share the same, right? Are we similar? Are we the same? If there is something positive that we can learn from others, or something negative that we can avoid, right? That is what we should be thinking about. And after that, we can offer help in a more targeted fashion. Okay, so in the rest of this seminar, we'll demonstrate how the government can observe and identify talents based on what is called the 8 observations. We cannot talk about all of them, as I said, but we'll go through at least 4, I think. Okay. So the first observation is speech, a person's speech or the person's way of speech. Okay, way of talking, if you like. Now, and by the way, when you see on the screen GPAC, it stands for Governing Principles of Ancient China, or the Essentials, or 群书治要. Okay. Now, speech can be treated as a reflection of one's heart, right? And this means that speech has two aspects. One is the content itself, which is the surface, and the other is the way that it is delivered, right? Two parts. I guess it's easier to deal with the former, the content, but the latter is more obscure. But the latter is more revealing, if you like, about the quality of a person. Now, in the Book of Changes volume of the Governing Principles, which is actually volume 1, there's a fairly interesting description about the relationship between the speech and the mental activity of the person. It says that if a person has a rebellious mentality, his speech would show shamefulness. In other words, he cannot hide the anxiety when talking. Okay. When a person is in doubt, his speech is incoherent and disorderly. So this means that his logic is unclear and sometimes self-contradictory. And it continues to say that if a person's mind is kind, he tends to speak little. This is because his mind is calm and stable, right? In contrast, when a person becomes impetuous, often the case, he speaks a lot. Okay. And it also says that when a person tries to press false charges on someone, false charges on somebody, his speech tends to be without focus. It's all over the place. And finally, it says that when a person has lost integrity and does things against ethics, his words would be crooked without resolution. So this is an interesting way to identify the potential mental activity of the speaker from the way that the words are delivered, right? Now, another way to understand this, okay, is by examining both the action and the speech. I think this has is relevant to corporate management and political management today, or any organization for that matter. And more specifically, this is about whether or not there is consistency between the content of the speech and real benefit. Okay. Now, this is from the volume, I think volume 9, the Analects, the Confucian Analects. Confucius argued that there is a causal relationship between the person's morality and the effect of his speech. Okay, I mean, if there's anybody in leadership position from the audience, I guess you can relate. A relationship between a person's morality and the effect of his speech. He said that the speech of virtuous people would definitely benefit others because he would not say something that brings harm. Okay. So we cannot say for sure that the person is definitely virtuous just because he has made a good speech. But you see that there's a difference there. So we have to be patient, right? And wait to see what he does. So saying something is different from doing. That's essentially what Confucius was talking about. And he also made very similar comparisons between benevolence and courageousness. He said that we can expect a benevolent person to be courageous, but not necessarily the other way around. So a courageous person is not necessarily benevolent. He could be quite violent, right? Now, of course, this principle can be applied in many social interactions and not limited to government recruitment. And you might think, well, gosh, that is complicated. I can't think of all that. I can't think of all of those rules of observation when I listen to someone talking. Well, yes, but there is a rule of thumb. Confucius said that fine words and an insinuating appearance are seldom associated with true virtue. Well, that's interesting. In other words, when the speech is too decorated, all right, and the appearance too fawning, the chances are the heart of the speaker is less virtuous than it appears to be. Okay. Um, and is actually is especially relevant, right, when government selects its officials. Um, and it suggests that electing somebody purely based on beautiful speech is perhaps problematic. Okay. This requires the government recruiter to have a high ethical and moral standard. Okay. In other words, the recruiter should not recommend somebody to a high position purely based on what the person says. Neither should the recruiter dismiss somebody purely based on the person's speech. Okay. And if that's the case, if that has become a corporate culture, something that written into the best code of conduct, code of best conduct, and things like that, then everybody would be focusing not um, on speech making, but cultivation and hard work, right? So you see that how you understand the relationship between speech and I guess effort, and it's it would impact it has an impact on how modern corporation or modern government operates. Okay. Now, so what's the solution here? What is the solution? When the government tries to determine the quality of the candidate, where is the focus? I guess that's our question, right? Well, if like I said, if anybody is in a leadership position, you can think about the same question from from your own organization's perspective, right? Where is the focus? The government principle suggests that a superior person, especially a morally superior person, should strive to be discreet in speech but quick in action. Now, this is driven by the fact that government work is onerous, or any work for that matter, right? Any official would, any official who truly cares about the quality of his work simply has very little time to make nice speeches. Okay, his mind is always on the job, not so much on speech making, unless he has to give a speech, right? In the business world, we can see a lot of great leaders and great entrepreneurs who achieve breakthrough after breakthrough. Rarely a good talker, rarely. I mean, although there are some who can do both very well. I think this recommendation still provides us with very good guidance on where we focus, where we should focus. Now, we have tried to establish that speech making is not necessarily a good indicator of true benefit to the people, right? So if we know nothing about the person, but just his speech, then we must not make a simple and naive inference between what one says and his true quality. Just want to be careful. Now, the other side of the coin is that there might also be potential relation between speech making and harm. And this relation may be amplified by the speaker's knowledge and position. Well, what does that mean? Well, to understand this, we need to think about the mentality of a speech maker. Right? The chapter of Zhong Lun of the governing principles reveal that, which is the second half of this page, reveals that a person who is a natural, who is natural in, who has natural ability in making convincing speech and choosing delicate words, is usually very perceptive about the details. And this person can perceive the subtle change in the listener's mind and choose his wording very carefully. He can be so good at it that he is able to get away from questioning and clear up the public doubt. And if the speechmaker has certain private agenda that is not in line with the public's interest, then his speech may be misleading. So this is why, um, you know, the the relation between speech making and harm may be amplified by the speaker's knowledge and position. Okay, and this is why we want to be very clear, very careful about a person's ability to make nice speeches. And it continues to say that if the public is able to distinguish between right and wrong, fact and false claim in his speech, then it's not a problem, right? It won't be a problem. This is similar to the efficient market hypothesis, by the way, in finance. Efficient market hypothesis. Basically, what it's saying is that it assumes that people have the perfect information and the perfect ability to access information. That's essentially what it's saying. So everybody has the perfect knowledge and information to know what is going on around us. Okay. But obviously, that is not the case in the real world. It's just a theory. The public usually do not have such skill to do that. Okay. Human mind suffers from behavioral biases, as we said, and people are not always able to make conscious conclusion based on logic and principles, right? I mean, we say things differently when we're happy and angry, right? So for this reason, the public may be misled without knowing. And such misleading information is anything but good, right? And it may cause harm to the public undetected. And not only that, the degree of misleading may increase with the knowledge and the position of the speaker. This is because with more knowledge and with higher position, the speaker is more capable to execute deceiving speech, speech making. Okay, we're not saying that this is definitely the case for every high official, but it's nonetheless a logical deduction and the potentiality that must not be ignored. Okay. Now, in fact, according to this volume, Zhong Lun, okay, the ancient sage kings all paid enormous attention to the use of words and misinformation. In particular, they made regulations to deal with individuals who misinterpreted the law or confused the public, etc. But this is not to be confused with blocking advice or ignoring advice. No, that's not the case. Okay, they're not the same thing. We must avoid swinging from one extreme to the other. Okay, and we want to stay on the middle way, which is much healthier. So we have talked about the point of cautious, okay, from the listener's perspective. Now, what about a speaker? What about a leader? What about the leader or managers? Okay. We always say that the leader should self-cultivate first before asking his subordinates to do the same. This is the essential principle of Confucius. Now, this is very relevant when it comes to understanding the style of speech making of the officials. The subordinates naturally follow the leader's preference. Okay, that's a very natural thing that happens in companies and any human organizations. If the leader likes to see, for example, ethical conduct or moral behaviors, then the subordinates would likely adjust their behavior to reflect the leader's preference. Now, one may argue that they're probably faking it. Yeah, well, okay, possibly. But to elevate the general moral standard of society as a whole, well, we got to start from somewhere, right? Even if the officials are faking it, it's better than not faking it. It's better than abandoning morality altogether, right? Now, when the people see the moral conduct of government officials, I mean, when I say the people, it's the general public, it's the common people, right? When they see the moral conduct of the government officials, they would appreciate it and start imitating and thereby improving the general atmosphere of social ethics. And I can give you a real life story about this. I had this very close contact with the CEO of one of the companies in Beijing. Is a female CEO, um, leading a food company in Beijing. And after she took over the company, um, got the top job, immediately, I think within 1 month, immediately you could see the change in the behavior of the subordinating employees, um, whatever they do. Okay, the way they walk, the way they talk to the suppliers, the supermarkets, the customers, and the whole market started to notice that this company has changed. And that all started from the CEO, okay? Because she was very different from the from her predecessor. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is that it's a natural thing for the employees or the subordinates to imitate the leader. It's a very natural thing in human world. Okay. Now, in contrast to that, if the leader likes flattering speech, then the subordinates will engage in decorative discourses, right? Same thing, same thing. So the officials will compete, making the best speeches, and so will the people in general. Okay. Now, what is more problematic is that it takes much more effort to harness a moral a moral society than a speech-making society. Let me say that again. I think it's important. It's problematic that it takes more effort to harness a morally superior society than a speech-making society where people love making speeches. Why? Because speech making is easier. It's easier than cultivation. So overall, we can see that the leader must be extremely cautious with what he or she prefers and be mindful about the effect on the rest of the society. Okay. So that's the first point of observation, speech making. And there's a lot about speech making you can find in the governing principles of ancient China. And by the way, I have just translated the whole volume of the Essentials some time ago, and it's still with the publisher. So hopefully, when it comes out, people will be able to see it, okay, and find it interesting. Now, the second point of observation is the result of a person's work versus his public image. Okay, result versus image, or the public opinion about him, if you like. Now, the governing principles recommend that when trying to understand an official, and of course, understanding people in general, it's important to investigate the things that he does and how he does it. So, result, right? Now, this may sound obvious. That's right. But the significance is that it prevents the observer from being influenced by public opinion. Now, we say that the public opinion can help us to form a certain understanding of a person. Yes? Especially in politics. But it's only one of the many aspects. As we said before, human mind suffers from behavioral bias. And so are opinions. So do opinions. Because opinions are generated by the human mind. And that's also the case when evaluating a government official. Confucius says that when the multitude hate a man, it is necessary to examine into the case. Likewise, when the multitude like a man, it is necessary to examine into the case. Okay, so this means that investigating the results of an official's work can help the government recruiter or the leader, for that matter, to verify public opinions. And I'm sure this applies to both positive opinions and negative opinions. And I think the logic is quite sound. Now the question is, how do we do that? How should we perform the investigation? There is an interesting passage in the governing principles which document an interesting method that verifies public opinion about a person, and it's mentioned in the conversation between Zigong and Confucius. Now, Zigong was one of Confucius' top disciples. Okay, a rich man. It was very interesting. So listen to this. He asked Confucius, "What is your opinion about a person who is loved and praised by all the people of his neighborhood?" Okay. Well, what do you think? What do you think? Confucius replied, "I would not reach a conclusion so quickly." Why is that? Well, the public opinion is a highly averaged opinion, highly averaged. And that average opinion masks many details, don't you think? So Confucius suggested that I would call it, using modern terminology, I would call it subsample analysis, right? Obviously, Confucius didn't say that, but his suggestion is something what I call a subsample analysis. So this method splits the overall population into two subsamples. One consists of virtuous people only, okay, and the other consists of unvirtuous people only. Now, Confucius would then observe the opinions given by these two subsamples separately. Now, what does that tell us? Well, from the officials, for the officials who receive positive opinion on average, it is better that the virtuous commentators favor him, not the unvirtuous commentators. And likewise, for the officials who receive negative opinions on average, it is better that the unvirtuous commentators dislike him, but not the virtuous commentators. Now, I think at this stage, our viewers would be able to perceive the rationale behind this interesting analysis, right? If an official or anybody, right, anyone, is disliked or hated by unvirtuous commentators, then it must be the case that the conduct of this person, of this official, is against the will of the unvirtuous commentators, which is likely to be who are likely to be selfish and harmful, right? Now, one example is the fight against corruption. Think about this. If a government official initiates an anti-corruption policy, do you think this policy would be welcomed by the corrupted? Absolutely not, right? Now, the corrupted persons would try everything at their disposal to condemn and to bash this official for obvious reason. Now, in contrast, virtuous commentators would welcome virtuous officials. So the government, I mean, the conclusion is that the government should be extremely critical when it comes to observing the quality of an official candidate based on the public opinion. I think the rationale behind this is very simple and yet quite accurate. Now let's dig a bit deeper into this rationale, okay? Why do we do this investigation? Well, the investigation of the actual result can help us verify public opinion and make more credible conclusion about a person. Okay. Now, there's a very interesting story about investigation and official assessment in volume 11 in the Governing Principles from the book of the Grand Historian. So here it goes. When it says when King Wei of Qi, there was a state of Qi. I'm not sure if anybody here from Shandong province. King Wei of Qi was reviewing the performance of two governors, okay, two high officials, governor of Jimo and the governor of Erdi. Okay. Now, the king found that there was a huge difference between the public opinions and their actual performance. The king received a lot of bad words and rumors about the governor of Jimo. But when the investigator came back, he reported that the agriculture was well developed. People there were able to feed their families with sufficient surplus. and the local government was very efficient in business, and the security is well maintained, etc. And it was revealed that the reason this governor of Timor was condemned and accused was that he never liked to flatter those people close to the king. Okay, he just didn't care. In other words, he refused to kiss ass. Okay, that's the idea. Now, what about the governor of Di, the other guy? Well, the king received a lot of compliments about him, but the investigation showed that Di had many underdeveloped farmlands. People there were poor. The local authority was irresponsive to security threats from the neighboring state, etc. Okay. Now, as you can probably guess, it turns out that the governor of Di was very good at keeping a close relation with the king's close assistants by channeling financial supports. So corruption, basically, right? He was corrupted. The king's assistant who accepted the financial support was simply not. They were simply not virtuous people. They were just bad people, because they should never have done that, right? And it was a serious conflict of interest. So their opinions towards the governor were very biased. Now, I think this story is of great significance, just not just for government recruiter, but for anybody in the position as a leader, anybody who has the responsibility to reviewing his employees. Okay, just be careful with what people blow into your ear. Essentially, that's what it means. Okay, and it shows the importance to understand the motivation behind certain opinions and the necessity of investigation. Okay, and I think this can help the government and general public to avoid losing the valuable officials and being harmed by a few bad apples. Okay. I just realized I don't have a lot of pictures in this slide, so that's definitely going to put you into sleep. I do recommend you have a cup of coffee, I think. Now, let's explore the necessity of investigation a bit further. Okay, I think this warrants some further study. Now, remember we illustrated the method of investigation earlier, right, using subsampling technique. And we said that it is important to distinguish which type of commentators express which type of opinion about a person. Yeah. So virtuous commentators or unvirtuous ones. Now we're going to explain it further from the perspective of the dynamics of faction composition. Now, according to volume 31, Liu Tao, Liu Tao is one of the oldest military books about military strategies, but not just about military strategies, but also about governing a state or governing a place, if you like. Okay. Now, according to this book, if the government or the leader only uses the average opinions as the basis of recruitment decision-making, then those with the support of a faction will be appointed. Well, those who are not part of a faction will not be promoted. Now, this is nothing mysterious about this. It's just simple math. But this simple math may invite unintended consequences. So let's assume that we have somebody with high integrity and superior moral standard. Okay. Now he is or she is now being judged by a group of commentators. Okay. Now, from a pure mathematical perspective, the marketable social standard is a simple average of the opinions of all the commentators of the society or an organization, right? It's an average vote. Now, if this group of commentators, in this group of commentators, there are obviously two kinds of opinions. One is favor and the other is objection. Now, in our example, favor means that this person's integrity is recognized and promoted, and vice versa. objection means that this person's virtue is denied. Okay. Now, let's say in this universe of commentators, there are more objections than favors. Okay, more objections than favors. So what about the average opinion then? Well, the average opinion about the person is denial, right? There's a simple average. Now, because we're playing God mode here, so we know the average opinion doesn't reflect the true quality of the person. We know, okay, because we're playing game here. Now, you may wonder, what has caused this biased opinion? Well, this requires us to look at the composition of the majority. Now, in this universe, there are, in fact, three types of opinion, not two, but three. Now, the first type is the so-called genuine favor. That is indicated by the green blocks with the smiling face. Can you see that? Yeah, at the bottom there, only 4. Green blocks, smiling face. Now, this is likely coming from the ethical commentators, or morally superior commentators, virtuous commentators who truly care about the public opinion and favor somebody with integrity. Now, the second type is the so-called genuine objection. Genuine objection is not the same as objection, it's a genuine objection, and is indicated by the yellow color blocks with dark, angry faces. Okay, 2 of them. Genuine objection. Now, these commentators may simply disagree with certain policies put forth by this person, or they may have they may have misinterpreted his integrity. But in any event, in any case, these 2 commentators are doing their jobs and expressing a genuine view. They're honest. Okay. Now, the third type is the so-called objection by dishonest interest groups, which is indicated by the yellow color blocks with red angry faces. That's the majority. And we have 9 of them. And remember, we have already assumed that our candidate is of high integrity. We know it by design. Okay. So we can imagine that his integrity may hurt the interest of certain unethical members or commentators. Apparently. The consequence is that when the unethical members or commentators band together and form the majority, negative opinions will take the upper hand. Okay, so in this example, even without considering the genuine objection, the number of objections by dishonest groups still outweigh the genuine favor, which clearly results in a non-recruitment of this person, which is a shame, right? So the governing principles conclude that when the leader only takes a person accepted by marketable social standard as a wise person and mistakes another defamed by society as unworthy person, ministers with undeserved reputation will be employed, and the days will become more tumultuous, and the day of the country will be numbered. Okay. Now, of course, our example is highly simplified, and is just one special case of many one special case out of many possibilities. But it does show the potential problems of blindly relying on the average opinion. And this, again, shows the necessity of the observation of the result. Now, in the biography of Confucius, there is a story about Confucius' investigation into the performance of the town master Zilu. Okay. So he was visiting Zilu once, whereas he was going to visit him. And after he crossed the border into the town, he said, it seems that Zilu respects the people and has achieved serious sincereness in his governing. Well, that's interesting because he didn't even see him, right? He hadn't even met him yet, but he was making that conclusion already. And after Confucius entered into the center of the town, he said, well, it seems that Zilu is a trustworthy governor. So his student Zigong was very puzzled, as much as we are, I suppose. And he asked Confucius, Master, we haven't met Zilu yet since we got here. So, but you have praised him multiple times. What's the reason? Now, Confucius replied, when we first crossed the border, I saw the farmlands are well cultivated and well organized. Okay, the irrigation ditches are deep. So this shows that Zilu treats the people with respect and sincerity. So the people are willing to put in the effort to achieve perfection in their work. But when we reach the town center, we can see that the walls and buildings are properly built, and the green belt is tidy. This also shows that Zilu is trustworthy, and the people are not willing to shirk. Okay. Now let's understand the historical backdrop here. In the past, all of these public infrastructure projects that we mentioned were done by corvée duty. Okay, so the high quality of work shows that people were not reluctant to work, but quite the contrary, they were very motivated. But they will only be motivated by a virtuous leader who respects them, right? So this is why, even without seeing Zilu, even without meeting the person, Confucius was able to reach this conclusion based on the investigation of the work. Now, this shows that it's important to look at the result and not simply relying on public opinions. The third point of observation is a person's behavior. Now, there's a Chinese saying, okay, that goes, it's better to observe the performance than listening to words. It's even better to observe the behavior than performance. Why? Well, this is because behavior is more detailed. Well, the performance is the end result, of course. Behavior is the process. Now, because it's the process, it reflects how a person thinks, so it's more revealing, if you like, about the quality of a person. Okay. There might be something that he can't control, uncontrollable factors that affect the result of the work, but the process can reveal a lot of things about this person. Now, in the observation, I don't think we have time to go through all the 6 good behaviors. We'll see. Right? But this is just to give you a taste of how we can decode the governing principles of ancient China and learn something about modern management. Okay. Anyway, in the governing principle, there is a specific chapter that provides guidance on, what's supposed to be good or bad behavior. The guidance focuses very much on ethics and the mentality of officials. So we'll use it as a framework for our discussion. Okay. Now, there are roughly 6 good behavior and 6 bad behaviors. The requirement of these good behaviors are so high that a candidate is deemed to be qualified for governmental work, even if he or she only present 1 good behavior. Okay, so a fairly high standard. Now, likewise, the 6 bad behaviors point to the core of moral degeneration. So even if only one of these bad behaviors is found in a person, this person is deemed to be disqualified for government work. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. As you can see, this is a huge topic, right? It's a huge topic, and you can write a PhD out of this, I suppose. So I hope that you enjoy the session, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.